intro today, but I'm Tulsi's younger sister, and I always am honored when I get to do her intro because I've known her for 35 years. I can tell you a little bit about her, but today we have something very special. My uncle is here. He's from Colombia. He's going to do the intro today. Everyone welcome my Uncle Bobby.
Talk about being ambushed.
I didn't tell him until right now.
I'm Bob Gabbard. My wife and I and raised two children here in Columbia. We've been here for 40 years and have tried to keep up with my niece. I'm 76 years old. I'm too old to be trying to keep up with anybody. But she has really challenged me and our family. But she's a wonderful, wonderful person. I don't care what's being said. We watched her baby to grow up. She's the most genuine person that you will ever meet as a politician. We're very proud to have her here in Columbia. And this goes all the way back to when she was going to OCS at Fort McClellan, Alabama, as God knows, I don't even remember how long ago that was, fellas. But at any rate, we're glad to have her here. Thank you all for showing up. And now's the time to introduce my niece, Tulsi Gabbard.
Thank you so much. Yes, good job. Thank you very much. It's always good to see you, and I'm so glad you could be here today. And thanks to all of you for making the time to come out on this beautiful Saturday afternoon. It's great to be back here in South Carolina. We got in very early this morning and have already done a couple of things today. I want to say thank you to you, Jonathan, and your team here, Fred and Pearl. Are Fred and Pearl here as well? No? Well, thank you for having us here in this community center. I really appreciate your opening your doors to us. You have a beautiful facility here, brand new, wonderful addition to this incredible community. So thank you for your service and leadership and your warm welcome to us. So I'll start with a few brief comments, but I really want to hear what's on your minds, and I want to be able to answer any questions that you have. I think it's very appropriate that we start with aloha. Aloha. You already feel a little better, don't you? There's a reason why I think it's so important that we start our conversations with aloha. We are facing such turbulent and divisive times in our country. We the people, being torn apart, divided, wedges being driven between us for so many different reasons, whether it's the color of our skin, where we come from, who we love, how we worship, if we worship, how much or how little money we may make, what kind of education you have. All of these things are unfortunately being used to drive wedges between us, to say, well, you're a part of this tribe and they're a part of that tribe. Rather than recognizing the truth that we all know and understand is that we all stand united as Americans, seeing each other, treating each other with respect, seeing each other as fellow Americans. And this is something that I appreciate more and more every day is the upbringing that I had in Hawaii, because in Hawaii we call it aloha. In other places they'll call it other things, but aloha really means I come to you with respect. I come to you with an open heart. I come to you with care and love and compassion and a recognition that we are all brothers and sisters. The literal translation of the word aloha, alo means to share, and ha means the breath of life. It's that recognition of all that we share in common. Recognizing we are all children of God. And inspired by that, then we can transcend, we can get beyond all of the different labels that are so often used to put us in one box versus another box versus another box, and actually see each other for who we really are. And inspired by that, then begin the conversation, begin the dialogue, and begin the work necessary for us to be able to work for the well-being of our brothers and sisters, work for the well-being of our fellow Americans, do all that we can to make sure that we have a better quality of life, and that these beautiful places that we get to call home, that we protect our planet, that we make sure that we have a safe place for us to live, for our kids to grow up in, and for their kids and their kids and their kids to grow up in a safe and beautiful place. So as we go through the many different issues that we face in this country, as we begin to talk about the problems, defining the problems, and then how we solve them, it is so important that we do so in this foundation of respect, this foundation of aloha. Because unless we do that, then we'll continue to see the kind of tribalism and divisiveness that has stood in the way of progress for so long. This is something that I took with me from the very beginning. The first day I was elected to Congress, I was elected in 2012, sworn in January of 2013, and immediately understood the responsibility that I had for my constituents to go and deliver results for them. I was elected as a freshman Democrat coming into a Republican majority in Congress, which is the first 6 years I've been serving now, almost 7 years. The first 6 years were in a Republican majority. And this is a question I get asked all the time in our town hall meetings is, okay, yes, I love the message of aloha, lead with aloha, live aloha every day, but how do you actually make that work when we're dealing with such incredible partisanship and gridlock in Congress as a result, where you're not getting the kind of results you would hope from your leadership? Understanding this, I came in and I try to think about how can I best start to build relationships? How can I best reach out? How do I begin these relationships with my colleagues in Congress? And so, beginning with aloha and with the universal language of food, I called my mother back in Hawaii and I asked her, Uncle Bobby, you've had my mom's toffee. I asked her if she would make 434 boxes of her amazing macadamia nut toffee. And she's incredible. Her and my dad raised 5 of us kids, and she said, my gosh, I think that's a great idea. Of course, I'd be happy to help. I said, well, I actually have one more favor to ask on top of that. I asked if she would make another 435 larger boxes of toffee for the staff of every member of Congress. She paused only for a moment. You're kind of holding your breath over there saying, oh my gosh. She paused only for a moment, as I could tell she was thinking like, okay, that's a lot of toffee. But she said, absolutely, yes, I'm in. It'll take me a little bit longer, but I think it's a great idea. And so as she was doing that back in Hawaii, she was stirring 2 pots at the same time, chopping up the macadamia nuts. My dad, Bobby's brother, he was looking over with a watchful eye as the self-appointed quality control officer. Took a slice from every single pan that she made, make sure it was just right. And I was in Washington handwriting notes to every one of my soon-to-be new colleagues and friends, learning more about them, where they come from, what committees they serve on, and just signing every note briefly, saying, I look forward to serving with you. And what was incredible to me was that very quickly after we started to deliver these little gifts of aloha, on the House floor during votes, which is the only time really that we are all together in one place, senior ranking Republicans, people from different parts of the country who normally I probably would not have a reason to interact with, started making that long walk from the Republican side of the floor to the Democratic side and looking for me, finding me, and just saying thank you. The toffee was delicious. I ate it all and I need more to take home to my family this weekend. But most importantly, asking me, tell me what's going on in your district. What are some of the issues that you and your constituents are most concerned about? Sharing, I'm the chairman of this committee, or I work on that committee, or I've been working for decades on this issue. saying, let me know how we can work together. That right there is the key. People who I'm meeting for the first time responding in such a way because of a simple gesture of respect and kindness, recognizing that we may disagree on 3 out of 10 issues or maybe 9 out of 10 issues and disagree strongly and debate heavily on those issues. But by seeing how we can find those areas of opportunity to work together, to deliver upon that mission that we all have to serve the people of our districts and our country, then that is where we must start, and that is what is key for us to be able to move forward. This is the kind of leadership that I will bring to the presidency. It's the kind of leadership that allowed me to be effective, serving as a Democrat in a Republican majority. Not just going home to my constituents and saying, hey guys, look, I'm a Democrat, Republicans are in charge, can't get anything done. That's unacceptable to me. That is unacceptable, because when it comes right down to it, we see each other as fellow Americans. We love our country. We appreciate the founding principles and values and freedoms of this country, and recognize that as diverse as we may be, we must move forward together in order to address the very real issues we face as it relates to healthcare, as it relates to infrastructure, as it relates to making sure that we have clean water to drink and clean air to breathe. The kinds of investments that we need to deliver for folks in our communities, whether they be in rural communities or urban communities, in every single part of this country. It requires leaders coming together and putting service above self, putting the well-being of people ahead of profits, ahead of partisan interests, ahead of any selfish ambition, actually putting that well-being of the people in our planet ahead of everything else. This is what's driving me. This is what's motivating me. This is why I'm running for president, because I believe that it has gone for far too long that our government has been a government of, by, and for the very few, the very rich, and the very powerful, looking out for their own selfish interests. And we, the people, are the ones who get left behind. We, the people, are the ones who end up struggling and suffering as a result. This has to change. This has to change. We can't allow it to go on any longer. But the only way that it changes is if we, the people, make it happen. If we, the people, make it happen. Exercising our voices through our votes, through organizing, making sure that the leaders in our country are not only hearing us, but are leading the charge, motivated by a desire to serve. To serve. Every single elected official at every single level of government works for you. They work for you. That's something that we cannot forget. Too often, I feel like the tables are sometimes turned around. But that's not the vision that Abraham Lincoln laid out for us in the Gettysburg Address. He spoke about the great sacrifice that's been made by so many to ensure that we move as a nation closer and closer to that proposition of equality and justice for all. And that the best way to honor that sacrifice is ensuring that we have leaders who are truly focused single-pointedly on that mission of service. Leaders who are of the people, by the people, and for the people. This is the kind of leadership I seek to bring to you as your president, to make sure that our White House can be the beacon of light and hope and opportunity that every single American deserves. I want to open it up to your questions now. Thank you again for being here. Thank you.
I'm Brian Muhammad. Even though I'm a member of the media, I'm not here. I wanted to hear you.
Thank you.
As a citizen of South Carolina and a concerned citizen of the world. And I know that all politics at the end of the day is local.
Yes.
But I think that you, out of the many candidates running for president, have addressed the issue, the international issue, the foreign affairs issue, very effectively and very importantly. And I wanted to ask you about that. This push to end these unnecessary wars.
Yes.
And now we're in a place like South Carolina where, you know, there's a great pride in the armed forces. And of course, I know you are a member of the armed forces.
I went to basic training here in South Carolina.
South Carolina.
That's right.
But your message to bridge this gap,
Yeah.
that you're not anti-American, but this concern about the U.S. Engagement throughout the world and what is really behind many of this involvement. You mentioned the rich, you mentioned those who, the few, the greedy few, and I'm not so sure that message is clear enough in general. You know, so I want you to, if you can talk more.
Of course.
And of course, this, you know, your view in terms of the Democratic Party. And I say Democratic Party, but really Hillary Clinton when she jumped out and accused you of being a Russian operative.
This is the appropriate response.
I wanted to give you, in my question, I wanted to give you a chance to address all of that once and again because, you know, I don't see too many people dealing with this problem
Yeah, you're right.
on a war.
You're right. Which is odd given every candidate running for president is asking you for your trust to serve you as commander-in-chief. It's the most important responsibility the president has. And I think, I find it deeply disturbing that this issue of our foreign policy, what kind of leadership any one of us brings, what kind of experience and background we bring to this incredible responsibility as commander-in-chief, this is something that should be examined very carefully. Given how long our foreign policy, crossing both party lines, has caused such pain and suffering and death to the American people, to my brothers and sisters in uniform, and to people in other parts of the world. Here's what is so disheartening to me. My message, both throughout my time in Congress, really since coming back from the 2 deployments I've served in the Middle East. I still serve in the Army National Guard, I'm still a soldier, and my introduction to your state was when I showed up for boot camp in Fort Jackson in the summer of 2003, in the heat of the summer of 2003. Southern hospitality had a whole different view when it came from a drill sergeant or 4 surrounding me. When I think about how those of us who are speaking out for an end to this interventionist foreign policy of going around the world and overthrowing dictators in other countries, the nation building that follows in these other countries, when I think about this foreign policy that's led us to a new Cold War and nuclear arms race with increasing tensions between the United States and nuclear-armed countries like Russia and China, arms treaties that were designed to reduce the numbers of nuclear weapons in the world being torn up and thrown in the trash can, making us and the world less safe. I've been speaking out to bring an end to these regime change wars, this new Cold War and arms race for quite some time, and especially within my presidential campaign because of the cost and the consequences, both the human cost and the cost to every single one of us as taxpayers. We have wasted over $6 trillion since 9/11 alone, waging wars that undermine our national security. They make us less safe, strengthen terrorist groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda. We continue to see now, for example, $4 billion spent in Afghanistan every single month. every single month. Earlier today, we were in a small town of Blackstock. They were talking about the dire needs of their community there, how a local hospital had just shut down. Now people are wondering where are they going to go to get the health care that they need. The resources, the money that's necessary to serve the needs of our local communities are not there. Why? $4 billion every month, continuing now in the 19th year in Afghanistan. And to accomplish what? To accomplish what objective? And the thing that's disheartening about this, and I think you were alluding to this, is how my critics of those other veterans, other Americans who are speaking out to bring about an end to this policy of being the world's police, accuse us of somehow being traitors to our own country and to our own government. What could be more patriotic to the United States of America and to the American people than ending these destructive, counterproductive wars of choice that have taken the lives of thousands of our nation's sons and daughters? What could be more patriotic than preventing the needless loss of life of yet another one of our service members? What could be more patriotic than to end these wasteful regime change wars and bring our taxpayer dollars back to actually serving the needs of our people here at home? What could be more patriotic than de-escalating tensions with other nuclear-armed countries, walking us back away from the abyss of nuclear catastrophe, making it so that no one has to live in fear of any kind of imminent nuclear attack? What could be more patriotic than standing up for the peace and prosperity and security of every single American in this country? What could be more patriotic than ending the dishonor to our men and women in uniform that we are seeing by sending them into harm's way to serve interests that have nothing to do with our country, that have nothing to do with the oath that we take as servicemen and women to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic? We are speaking the truth, and those who are lashing out as a result are fearful of losing their power and losing their profits that have come about because of this dangerous and destructive foreign policy establishment that's been in place for far too long. And yes, this is the foreign policy legacy of Hillary Clinton. It's not exclusive to her. We have seen leaders from both political parties, and this is espousing this very same destructive policies. Your U.S. Senator, Lindsey Graham. Need I say more? This is, what'd you say? How?
We just walk away?
We don't walk away. Here's the thing. Saying that we want to end these foreign interventions, toppling dictators in other countries, should not equate isolation. Does not equate turning our back on the world and just looking inward. The fact that this is often the assumption that's made points to how sad the culture is that we live in, where even foreign policy quote-unquote experts in Washington who assume this, or people in the media, they say, well, Tulsi Gabbard's an isolationist because she wants to end these stupid wars. As if the only way that we, the United States, can engage with other countries and other leaders in the world is by bombing them or implementing draconian sanctions against them, which is really a modern-day siege tactic of warfare. How about we live up to the values and principles that we are proud of in this country as we relate to other nations in the world by truly being a force for good? I will lead with a foreign policy that's based on cooperation rather than conflict, recognizing that the only alternative to diplomacy is war. Now, unfortunately, sometimes war is necessary. I'm not a pacifist, I'm a realist. Sometimes war is necessary to keep the American people safe, to defeat a threat to our national security and safety. That must be a last resort. We must pursue all avenues of diplomacy to be able to work out the differences that we have with other countries, while also leaving space and opportunity to be able to work together on areas of shared and common interest. While the warning is being sent to every single one of us who is taking a stand for peace, who is taking a stand for ending this policy of being the world's police through the way that I have been treated, the warning is really, if you speak up against this establishment foreign policy, then you too will be labeled a traitor. You too will be labeled a foreign agent. But our response, our message back is we will not be intimidated. We will not be silenced. We, the American people, our voices will drown out those of the warmongers, the military-industrial complex, the foreign policy establishment, because this is our country. It is our brothers and sisters in uniform. It is our future that we are fighting for. And no one's going to get in the way of our ability to be able to do so.
Can you talk about the call between Trump and Erdogan about our troops leaving and what happened with the Kurdish people? Because in a way that sounds like, oh, we're ending something, but it sounds to me like you would have done a lot more negotiating. I'd like to hear what you would have done.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to answer that. I think when we look at all of the different places that our troops are deployed to in different parts of the world, I think we should all be asking the question, what are they doing there? Because the number one thing we learn as service members, we have veterans here. Yeah. The number one thing that we learn is, what's your mission, right? You can't begin a military operation, even a training exercise, without knowing what is our mission. And it must be a clear and achievable goal and objective that must be understood by every single person. The question for our troops being in Syria is, what is their mission, right? So last December 24th of 2018, I believe it was via a tweet, but Donald Trump said, I want to bring our troops home from Syria. At that time, I publicly said, I agree. The point was that ISIS had fallen, the caliphate had been destroyed of ISIS, and the work that the U.S. troops were doing with the Syrian Kurds there had largely been successful. Trump is saying, all right, let's bring our troops home. I agree. I said we should bring our troops home. If they're not there fighting ISIS, they have no business being there, but it must be done in a responsible way. Nothing happened since what we saw occur a couple of weeks ago, when all of a sudden there was not a withdrawal of U.S. troops, but a moving of our troops from the northern border of Syria away, a little bit farther south. Basically, after this phone call, giving a big green light to Erdogan of Turkey to move in, invade, and begin a genocide of the Syrian Kurds, who had been our strongest allies on the ground fighting against ISIS in Syria. To make matters even worse, in that time, from December of last year to October of this year, President Trump and his administration had been lying to the Syrian Kurds, promising them over and over again, we will protect you, we have your backs, we'll be there for you, we'll give you all the support that you need to protect yourselves against a possible Turkish invasion, something that Turkey has been threatening for a very long time. It was not a matter of if, it was a matter of when. Our government was blocking the Kurds from negotiating any kind of security agreement with the Syrian government so that they could form a common defense of that northern border. I've met and spent time in the Kurdish region of Iraq. I have met and spent time with leaders of the Syrian Kurds. And they have never expected or even requested that the U.S. troops remain in the northern part of Syria for good as a protecting force. They have always wanted to maintain their own security of their tribal lands where they have lived for so long. Our government blocked them from forming the security agreements they would need to protect themselves. And so when Trump pulled our troops back away from the northern border, he left them there to slaughter. Their blood is on his hands. Where are we at now? We've moved 1,000 or so troops into Iraq and is now saying they're going to deploy more U.S. troops back into Syria to protect oil, to protect a Syrian oil field. So, what's the objective? The truth is now coming out. What would I have done differently? I would have gone through the planning process, both with our DoD and our Department of State, and helped support and facilitate the Syrian Kurds in their efforts to negotiate a lasting security agreement with the Syrian government and other actors within the region to ensure that they were protected from that Turkish invasion and occupation. That failed to happen, which is now why we're seeing what we're seeing, where Turkey is coming in and the Kurds are being pushed out of the tribal lands and homes that they have lived in for so long. Why is this happening? Why did this happen? Why did they block the Kurds from doing this? It's because of this long-standing regime change effort that our country has had in place since 2011. So, two things. Our government would rather let the Syrian Kurds be slaughtered than have them negotiate with the Syrian government for a security agreement. And now with the troops deploying to the Syrian oil fields, what they're really doing is blocking the country of Syria and the Syrian people from benefiting from their own oil resources economically. They would rather see the Syrian people continue to suffer and struggle and starve than because they refuse to go and overthrow their own government, than to allow them the freedom to determine their own future for themselves. I can't begin to say how wholeheartedly I disagree with the approach that this administration has taken, but this is something that started in the previous administration as well. And what's happening right now to the Syrian Kurds, what's happening right now to the Syrian people who are still suffering under these draconian sanctions that really are this modern day siege, much like we're seeing in Yemen with Saudi Arabia. Tens of thousands of people killed, millions more starving because of these sanctions and this embargo. They can't get clean water, they can't get food, they can't get basic power. How do you begin to rebuild a country, a war-torn country, when you have no access to the basic necessities of life? So when we're talking about ending this policy of being the world's police and intervening in other countries, this is what we're talking about. We should stay out of it. Get out of their way so that the Syrian people themselves, working with the Syrian Kurds and others in their own country, can begin to rebuild their own lives and determine the kinds of reforms and changes they would like to see for their country and through their government.
First of all, I just want to say thank you for your inspiration. Because of you, well, of course, you led me to be more educated on foreign policy. Although I was, I always thought, why were we in wars like Iraq and Afghanistan? But there was so much more I learned because of you. Like, for example, the fact that we were in Syria, the fact that we were propping up, the Saudi Arabian government, which funds terrorist groups like Al Qaeda. I learned a lot of that from you.
Good.
But also, you're kind of what sparked my, what should I say, political awakening. I used to be a Republican. Then after the 2016 primary, I voted for the Libertarian nominee for president, Gary Johnson. And then after that, I became an independent, but then I saw you and your courage to take on the DNC in 2016. You stepped down after, they, what should I say, harassed you for, not falling in line. And you also stood up to the DNC because of their messed up, polling criteria. But you stood up to them and you got on that debate stage about a week or two ago. And I was one of the ones saying, please get on that debate stage. We need you to be a voice for us, Tulsi. But getting to my question, that statement was just a little thank you.
Yes.
But anyway, so one of my questions to you is, so it's when you become president, I'm gonna vote for you in South Carolina, but when you become president, not only will you have to fight against the Republican Party establishment, but also the establishment of your own party. So, will you, as President Gabbard, I'm hoping, will you, as President Gabbard, use the bully pulpit to get your agenda through paths of, ending regime change wars, getting health care for all, reinforcing the Clean Air and Clean Water Act, and all of these things that you are proposing?
Yes. The establishment that you speak of ties back to what I opened our conversation with. The establishment that is entrenched within the leadership of both political parties is under a stranglehold of the powers that be. The greedy special interests, corporate interests, military-industrial complex. You can go down the line across the many different industries and the influence that they have in our politics. Yes, the revolving door that goes between those who hold public office of some sort and then those who go and work in the private sector that benefit from the policies that are then made. And what happens as a result? We the people, suffer as a result. I'll give you one egregious example. There are many, but one egregious example. No, not John. I mean, John Bolton's a whole different conversation. Medicare and Big Pharma, the Affordable Care Act. It still blows my mind. It doesn't matter how many times we talk about it. It still blows my mind that Big Pharma has such a huge influence over Washington that no matter how many times people have tried to strip the provision from our law that prohibits Medicare from negotiating lower drug prices, they failed. This law is still on our books. I've had some of these lobbyists representing Big Pharma tell me, you know what, even if you took that prohibition away, even if Medicare was allowed to negotiate lower prescription drug prices, it really wouldn't make that much of a difference for the consumer. Really? Why are you fighting so hard to keep it in there then? Our government, therefore us as taxpayers, we are the largest purchaser of prescription drugs on the planet. Not in the country, on the planet. We are the largest customer that they have. So imagine how much leverage we have as their largest customer to negotiate those prices lower. This is why they fight so hard to keep these laws on the books, because this is what drives up their profits. Ridiculously and painfully, this is what's causing such incredible hardship and suffering for people who are on Medicaid and who can no longer afford the medicines or the prescription drugs that they need. One of many egregious examples of the entrenched establishment, the greed that drives it, the corruption that exists, that we, the people, need to root out. So yes, if I'm your Democratic nominee, and I plan to be with your support, as your president, I will lead reforms in our Democratic Party so that our party can truly be the party of, by, and for the people. advocating for the well-being of people, advocating for the protection and preservation of our environment and our planet, bringing an end to these warmongering policies. And I will lead these reforms not by fighting against the Republicans, but reaching out and working with those who are of like mind, who may have different ideas and different approaches on how to solve these challenges, but who also would like to see a peaceful, prosperous future for them and their kids, who would also like to know that when their kids are going to school and they're drinking water from the water fountain, that that's clean water and that they aren't being poisoned. There are more things that we, the people, share in common across party lines than we often realize. And the reason is because these conversations rarely exist anymore in this highly polarized environment. And we've seen it in our family, like many other families, people who no longer speak to each other, family members or close friends, because of partisan political differences or just political differences. This is heartbreaking. It's not who we are. We can and we must do better. And that is the change that I will bring about as your president.
Last question?
Hey, I'm a bit of a fish out of water, Congresswoman Gabbard, sorry. I generally would identify as a Republican, and I generally vote Republican, which is, and it's okay to disagree. And, you've been a great example.
Without even asking for a raise of hands, I can guarantee you're not alone.
But that's not my car out there. But watching you on stage and seeing you be willing to, I like your persona. I like how you are very a caring and a genuine person and are able to read. You would seem to be a candidate that is not polarized on one end or the other, because there is a lot of political polarization today, as we all can attest to. But you would seem to be a great candidate that can bring the parties together. And that's why I'm here, and my whole family's here. And my daughter had a question of, would you allow half days of schools on Friday? But my question to you is, you talk about healthcare for all. And I just wanted to know, with your plan for that, what kind of tax ramifications, especially on the middle class, would that have in your plan?
Is that really your question?
I love it. Well, let's start lobbying your local school board first. Let's start there, shall we?
Her mom's the principal.
Oh, God. Let's start at home. Good luck. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your whole family coming and being here. I love your face paint. And you're exactly right. Unifying our country is necessary for us to tackle the challenges that we face and for us to continue to be the United States of America. Healthcare is an issue that I constantly hear from people in all different parts of the country is the number one issue of concern. And hearing heartbreaking stories from people about themselves or their children or parents or loved ones who either because they are uninsured or underinsured or happened to have an emergency and went to a healthcare provider who was out of network and therefore got charged 6 times more than they should have been charged. People who are suffering under this highly profit-driven healthcare system that we have. And frankly, a healthcare system that really is not about healthcare, it's more about sick care. It's not about promoting the prevention of sickness and actually promoting the health and well-being of people. It's about those who can gain more profits by maintaining the system that we have. What I'm advocating for is ensuring that we have quality health care for every American, regardless of how little you have in your pocket. And doing so without eliminating every individual's choice. If you want to get supplemental private insurance or you've got a great employer plan, maybe through your school, that's your choice and freedom to be able to do that. But that does not undermine our ability as a country to ensure that we have quality health care for all. How does this impact how much money we're paying? I think that's really the bottom line of this question, right? Because we're taking out the private, the almost 20% of overhead costs that come from the private insurance market, we are drastically, automatically bringing down that cost of care. So I think it's important for us to look at this. Well, right now, if we're paying, you know, some people pay $500 a month, $800 a month for a family. I think on the low end of insurance coverage, if you have employer assistance, others, even through the healthcare exchange, are paying $2,000, $3,000 a month for their family. We're paying more for healthcare than any other country in the world. By taking out the for-profit element of the healthcare insurance, we're automatically already bringing down the cost of care. I think that that is the starting point for looking at how much we as taxpayers will pay to ensure that we have that guarantee of health care, the quality health care that's accessible within our own communities. But I think we have to go farther than that, look at actually what are the other things that are driving up the cost of care. So we talked a little bit about prescription drugs, right? We got to look at what are the things we need to do to bring down the cost of those prescription drugs. Yes, by opening it up to make sure that our government can negotiate lower prescription drug prices, that we reform the patent system that allows big pharma to abuse the patents that we have in place, blocking generic companies from coming in and producing these drugs at a lower price. You know, they'll exploit a little loophole, they'll change one little thing without actually changing the drug just to block generics from coming in so they can make profits for a longer period of time. Bring about those types of reforms, reimportation of cheaper drugs. There's a number of things that we can do to further bring down the cost of care. And then again, focus on the health element of this. I think that it is a disservice to people that our doctors who go to school are not required to take any nutritional training whatsoever, even as a general practitioner. And you look at how much what we eat in our everyday lives, the kinds of dietary choices we make, it does. It has a great impact on our health. And if someone is going to see their doctor, they should know that their doctor will be able to give them some educated advice about basic, simple choices we can make for ourselves and for our families that can both help deal with healthcare complications, but also help to prevent some of the things like diabetes that we're seeing growing more and more in so many communities as our diets go farther and farther away from kind of whole foods, not the store. That was not my intention. And more towards highly processed, high sugar, high carbohydrate food. So I think there's a lot that we've got to look at that can actually further bring down the cost of the delivery of healthcare by encouraging and incentivizing a more healthy people and healthy society.
Thank you. I'm a retiree from the VA. For years, one of the best systems of negotiation for drugs is from the VA. System-wide. The tools are already in place to be able to bring down the cost of drugs. But when under the current administration, who is trying to privatize the drug negotiations, okay? The system is there, but it's being totally ignored and actually not cared for, not paid attention to. So it's not that there's not an answer. A very effective. The people don't know that this system of negotiations for drugs is not a system that's been exposed as being totally for profit. And I think if there was any, and you should know this, that the VA has the tools to do it. They do. But it's being ignored. And I think that this one effort could be the lowering cost of drugs if it were just allowed to work. Do you know that the VA system is the most admired system of drug negotiations from the private sector? Private hospitals go to the VA system to try to duplicate it on the private side. That's how much medical professionals know that there's a system out there that works. So I just wanted.
Thank you. You're exactly right. You're exactly right. Again, why they're fighting so hard to make sure that what's working in the VA is not implemented across the rest of our government. I was shocked recently when I learned that the big pharmaceutical companies in their industry as a whole, they spend more annually on lobbyists and PACs in Washington than they do on those television ads that you see at any hour of the day advertising for any one of a number of prescription drugs. You can't hardly watch anything on television without seeing those ads, right? They spend more, and those are expensive. They spend more on lobbying and PACs in Washington to maintain the status quo because it's that important for their profits. This is what we need to be able to turn around to take, you're right, what's already working. The VA is the only one that's actually able to negotiate these lower drug prices. How about we do that for every single American? Thank you. It would be the last one.
I think you're probably a hero to all of us for the stand you've taken on foreign policy. That really stands out in the debates and everything you've done in your time in Congress. I'm curious, how do you feel about funding that America has given to all these foreign countries? In particular, a lot of funding has gone to one country that I don't feel like we've been able to criticize in any public way. And I'm wondering if, I don't know your vote in Congress on, there's one country that has sunk an American battleship, the USS Liberty. There's one country that has received over $1 trillion in aid, and over, gosh, almost a $250 billion under President Trump. And I'm wondering if I feel like that this is also a country that has targeted you personally in very unfair ways through the media and as soon as your campaign was announced. And I'm wondering if you're kind of aware of those vectors or of attack on you and your campaign, and how you would feel about funding toward the state of Israel and their policy in the Middle East, which we give carte blanche freedom to do whatever they want.
Good question. Good question. So you covered a lot there. Israel has been and will continue to be an ally of the United States. Just as with any ally of the United States, we should not be blind to that relationship. Turkey is an ally of the United States, a NATO ally of the United States, and yet they are not at all acting as an ally should. Look, there's actions that Israel has taken. I've taken votes in Congress, for example, to denounce the occupation and taking of lands from the Palestinian people illegally. I think constructively, we, the United States, need to see how we can best be a force for peace and for ultimately achieving the goal of stability and security and a homeland for both the Palestinian people and the Israeli people. I think a lot of the actions that this administration has taken, especially towards Israel and Palestine, have been done because of political interests with Trump and his partnership with Bibi Netanyahu. Recent elections in Israel are still ongoing, actually, as they're trying to see what kind of new government they form. My hope is that it is a government that will be more interested in resuming the conversations and the negotiations and the relationships necessary to build that path finally towards peace in the region there. It's something that unfortunately hasn't occurred now for a very, very long time. Ultimately, it is the Israeli people and the Palestinian people who are the only ones who can ultimately make that deal that will secure their own futures. As president, I will look at the aid, the dollars that we're providing to any and every country. There's a long, as you're talking, I'm rolling through a whole list of countries in my head that are taking actions that are of great concern. You know, Saudi Arabia is one of them, the top of the list. That we're continuing to help support this war, this genocidal war in Yemen that Saudi Arabia is waging against the innocent Yemeni people. Tens of thousands killed, millions more starving and suffering. We're continuing to provide Saudi Arabia with weapons that they are giving to Al-Qaeda directly arming and supporting the terrorist group that flew those planes into the World Trade Center in New York. Exactly. And yet they call Saudi Arabia an ally and against terrorism. We have to continue to speak the truth and only say, well, how do we change this? How do we fix this? Because again, this crosses both party lines. I introduced legislation called the Stop Arming Terrorists Act with Rand Paul. Rand Paul was the only U.S. senator who co-sponsored that bill in the Senate. The only U.S. senator. So what does that tell you? How deep the problem lies. When this bill, it was very simple. It said our taxpayer dollars should not be used to directly or indirectly provide arms or money or support to terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda. Isn't it shocking that I would even have to introduce a bill to say that? But this is the truth. This is what's been happening, and it's been happening, it's still happening in Yemen, it's been happening in Syria, because Al-Qaeda was the strongest force on the ground to be able to overthrow the government. So covertly, we're providing them with their support, our government was. But this is a problem that's continuing to persist. And it undermines our national security, and it takes our taxpayer dollars away from where they are needed most, which is right here, serving our community, making sure that our kids and our teachers have the things that they need to make sure they're getting a good education, to make sure that we're able to provide quality health care for all, to make sure that we're protecting our environment. Go down the laundry list of all of the needs that you think about in your communities when you drive down the street, when you wake up in the morning. Requires strong and courageous leadership, the likes of which we haven't seen for a long time. I'm running for president to bring that leadership, prepared to walk in on day one into the Oval Office and serve you as your commander-in-chief, to end this crazy foreign policy of being the world's police. Make sure we don't start any new regime change wars, work to end this new Cold War, nuclear arms race, and bring back our dollars back to where they're needed right here at home. I need your support to do this. The obstacles are great. The obstacles are great. You're seeing already about the backlash that comes from this, how they're trying to smear and undermine our campaign. But I have faith and I have hope in the power of the people. That when we stand up, when we make sure that our voices are heard, understanding we are the only ones that can bring about this change, that can overcome these obstacles. The vast majority of the American people believe in what we are saying, agree with what we are saying, across party lines. That means the challenge is on all of us, every single one of you here, and I need your help. I need your help to bring more people to this effort, bring more people to this movement. We need contributions, we need votes, we need more people to know who I am and what kind of leadership I'm seeking to bring. Every one of you can help with this. We don't have that much time. Y'all are gonna be voting here in just a few months. So let's get to work. Thank you so much.